Okay. Okay. Let us start. Right. Last week, I quickly discussed about the structure of Malaysian government as well as the financial management framework. Then I introduced you various agencies and a very important person, this guy, controlling officers. Because half of the semester when we discuss, basically we are talking about this guy, controlling officers, the person in charge. Okay. So now we move on. The topic is accountability in public sector. Very important topic. Okay. Even I mean, since you are in first year, from time to time, you will be introduced, okay, about accountability, right? Because the word accounting itself is part of main mechanisms, okay, to support accountability when there are, parties basically in contracts and superior subordinates, okay, shareholders and companies, right? So of course, in the case of public sector organizations, it's more complex, huh? Okay, you talk about government agencies, ministries, and then with the parliament, with the voters, right? So all this framework need to be elements need to be discussed. Okay, so that's why listen carefully because if you understand, okay, it's quite interesting because sometimes some of the item here it also a narrative or a way of doing things that's happening in the government, particularly in the government agencies, in relationship with the treasury and the government agencies with the parliament. Okay, so and then we talk about responsibilities. So with that responsibilities, there is accountability. Okay, so try to get the concepts clear. Okay, a bit more. I mean, give some thought about it. Okay, give some time because it will be with you for a very long time. Okay, because another way, you may argue, yeah, this is government. Okay, government agencies. What, how that will have an effect on my career? Okay, okay. The fact that you see last week, I think many of you possibly you were reading. Did you read that in case of Malaysia, where at least now one of the major audit firm was fined, but and then was found basically as part of out of court settlement, had to pay almost 500 million ringgit. Do you know which firm is that?
Yes, sir.
Deloitte.
Deloitte.
Exactly, Deloitte, isn't it? So of course, it's part of their audit works services. Okay, of course, we're not going to discuss about the scope of the work, but how, because it can be that scope and that level of scales, when if it is not properly done. Okay, so massive, involving major government agencies or company, one MDB. Okay, one MDB was initially been mooted to be, basically supporting government policy to speed up service delivery, because we talk about efficiency, effectiveness. But then out of that demand for speed services, so there is a compromise in the governance. Okay, so these are the issue that we try to somehow, people like you, very, very important to make sure that in the future, okay, maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, when you develop all your skills and competencies, you should be able to support. I think nowadays, okay, we know how to spend the money, where should be the focus of the locations. Alhamdulillah, I mean during the COVID, the government manage it well. Okay, one of the good examples globally. But then when it comes to governance, still an issue. Okay, so these are the ongoing challenges faced not only in Malaysia, in countries worldwide. So, but then something that, if we learn carefully, that we can contribute. Okay, right. So one of the concepts or definition under accountability. We look at these stewardships, the duty to provide an account on users of resources and not the effect, the use, or the purpose of entrusting the resources to the steward. Okay, so to provide an account, use of resources. Okay, of course, I mean, possibly this is a quite old definition, okay, because use of resources nowadays, also the demand of the effect of the resources. It's no longer just reporting how the expenditures are being made, but what would be the impact. So there's the current demand. Okay, accountability as a term, okay, the giving and demand for reason for conduct. Okay, that's one definition by Roberts and Scapen. Is I think it's definitely accounting professors. The duty to provide an account by no means necessitates an account of reckoning those actions for which one is held responsible. Government accountability is the duty of public officials to report their actions to the citizens and the right of citizens to take action against those officials whose conduct the citizen found unsatisfactory. Okay. So basically, you know, they have that responsibility. They're being elected or appointed on behalf of the elected officials, okay, by the voters, okay, to basically run the government in the right way, yeah. And then with that, they are held accountable, okay. So of course, there are mechanisms of accountability. Yeah? I'm not saying we are talking about formal structure of accountability. There are ways to voice the demands, but at the same time, there are ways of how the reports, the mechanisms to hold the government servant accountable. So get used to all these jargons and terms. Hopefully, by end of the semester, all this become your natural thought process. Okay. So when you look at government servant, not only possibly government servant, but others as well, because this also can be the concepts and the principles can also be applied to the private sector. But I think, of course, we limit our discussion in the private sector organizations. Right, types of accountability in private sector. So there are types here means you can understand the scope of the responsibility. Okay, and accountability. So I keep on mentioning responsibility and accountability. Okay, these two words. It's like two sides of the coin. Okay, you are responsible, but are you accountable or not? Okay, so are you responsible and also accountable? So this basic question sometimes, okay, if you are accountable, if you are responsible, you should also be accountable. Okay, so these are complete package. But sometimes you are responsible, but you're not accountable. Okay, it can create problems. So listen carefully, because this also we talk about accounting, we talk about accounting reports, we talk about you know, governance. Sometimes simple question, but it carries a lot of meaning. Okay, and sometimes I know a basic question, but you know, it should be provided, or it should be the system should be sufficient enough to support. Otherwise, there always be loopholes. Okay, so that's the job of accountant when you know, basically review a system, reporting system, accounting system. So these are part of the, I believe so. I have a strong believer in that. You should be able to tell. Okay, otherwise, because at the end we talk about resources. You talk about public money, or even in the private sector, you talk about shareholders' money. But you know, if it is accountability system, there is loopholes. Sometimes you can also translate this into governance or internal control. Then someone is very difficult to hold someone accountable. Right. So if you look at this, the first at the top there, financial accountability. So basically discuss about complying with all laws and regulations in performing their functions. Okay. So financial accountability, of course, the name is financial. If you look at the division given, is more on compliance to rules and regulations. Right. Second, program accountability. Okay. So of course, a new jargon for you. The word program here has meaning. It's a technical term in budgeting. Okay, particularly in financial management in public sector. used by the treasury, okay, by maybe very senior civil servants. The word program, it's not computer program. Of course, we talk about computer program or maybe activities, but somehow it shares similar meanings. But when it comes to government or public sector organizations, it become terminology. So program here, program accountability, the responsibility of government personnel to ensure that the objective of individual programs and activity of government organizations are achieved. Okay, so it's very closely related to organization. Okay, a program as an organization. So what is organization? A government organization. So you can see IIUM, UIA, this university is a live example of government organizations. Okay, how complex it is, what kind of activities. Okay, and to make sure that is functioning, is effective. Okay, so you have so many support system in place, right? But to put simply, for government to control and to monitor, okay, they call it program. They will discuss this further when we talk about budget topics. But it's also here as accountable type of accountability. We call it program accountability. Thirdly, management accountability. Okay, the responsibility of the management of government organization to ensure there is effective, efficient, and economic utilization of government resources under their control. Right? So if you look at program accountability is about achieving the objective of the organizations. But management, they start mentioning effective, efficient, and economic use of resources. Okay, so these three elements, very powerful term: effective, efficient, and economic utilization. I think the whole the whole accounting subject is basically to achieve this. Of course, we cannot achieve practically. It's very difficult, okay, to translate effective and efficient into measurable matrices. Okay, that's why one of the metrics that is widely used or commonly used is basically profits. Okay, so of course, profits is hardly can achieve the level of measurement that is required by effectiveness and efficiency. Okay, but nevertheless, that's the most practical. Okay, that we learn over the 4 years in undergraduate to understand to measure this profit measure. But in any case, these are management accountability. Yeah. So these are the challenge. Maybe that is also topics that and also discussion that we have in this class with regards to management accountability. Right, and another grouping also by think class. So you can see that on top of that is managerial and financial accountability. Okay, related to efficiency and effective use of public fund. There are also political accountability. Okay, the desire to be loyal to one's political party or to minister appointed by the political party. I think that's quite straightforward because generally, like Malaysia, I think significant majority of countries in the world that basically the leaderships, okay, is basically based on political parties before they move or they have to win the election. With that, with the political party, they become the running government. So that is why then the members of the elected elected officials, okay, civil servant, right, they have that political accountability because they have political manifesto, and then every political party, they have priorities, promises that they made to the voters, that's why they win the election. So all this need to be translated to a form of political accountability mechanisms. Right, another is public accountability, okay, the duty to serve the voting public. Right, this is generally, of course, at the end, we're talking about citizens of the country, publics, and multiple stakeholders within the government, inside the government, as well as outside the government. Okay, so these are another groups of types of accountability. Another by steward ladders of accountability. Okay, I think the interesting part of steward, he tried to rank the accountability from low level to highest level accountability. Okay, so the lowest level of accountability is accountability for probity and legality. Okay, similar to financial accountability, so it's considered as lowest level form of accountability. Followed by process accountability, performance accountability, program accountability, and policy accountability. Okay, so if you look at program, it's very similar to the definition given before, the achieving objective of the organizations. But then on top of a program accountability, there's a policy accountability. Yeah? Generally, policy, if we want to translate this into the practice, is basically generally policy accountability is at the parliament level as well as at the cabinet ministers. Okay, whereas government agencies, their level of accountability up to program where they support various government policy. Okay, so I think these also try to, because at the end we are talking about there must be a person who is in charge, who is accountable, like just like yourself. Okay, you are student. Okay, you are accountable to your parents, to yourself, to the university, to so many. Okay, of course, generally, but then there must be mechanisms of how to make you or how to hold you accountable. Okay, so one of them definitely your CGPA. Okay, as part of our discussion, just to get you some ideas what we're talking about. And I think inshallah in the future when we discuss more, then you can have a clear idea what will be the differences between all these different level of accountability and who is in charge, who should be accountable. Okay, but then I think partly also when we discuss on the introduction, okay, there are various policies that was mentioned, for instance, like illegal immigrants, okay, the issue of safety, road safety. These are example of policy, okay, where at the end should be, the ministers, the parliament, they basically, particularly the elected ministers, okay, they are the one who, developing the policy, they should be held accountable. But definitely all government machineries is basically helping them. So to what extent the government machinery should be held accountable? Is it at policy or maybe at the maximum at program? So these are some of the issues, very dynamic. You can see from one country to another. Maybe in Malaysia, sometimes it can be overlapping as well because of the expectation of the people also can be demanding. When you try to hold civil servants, okay, they by right, okay, based on their scope of work, they should be hold accountability at the program, but they to take into account policy issues. Okay. Right now we move on to accountability in Islam. Right. I think okay. These are a definition given by Prof. Shahul Hamid. Well, Shahul used to be our head of department, one of our lecturers at the department. Okay. I think his expertise in Islamic accounting, right? So he provides this definition. I think out of his PhD works, maybe some of his major research. The duty of an entity to use, okay, as well as to prevent the misuse of the resources entrusted it in an effective, efficient, and economical manner. Okay, so he also bring in these dimensions of performance or accountability into the definition of accountability within the boundaries of the moral and legal framework of society. Okay, so you can see that not only legal, okay, or administrative functions, you also bring in moral, so very close to Islamic, of the society, and to provide an account of his action to accountees. Okay, accountee here can be parliament, okay, superiors, and at the end, definitely Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Well, not only the person who provided it with his financial resources, but to groups within society and society at large. Okay, so definitely if you talk about government organizations, is their target customers, target groups, okay, community, okay, these are their stakeholders. And so you can see that on top of the primary accountability. So he gives this primary accountability and secondary accountability. So very obvious, the primary, is at the end we are accountable to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, right? And very real. Okay, in the day of judgment, all of us, we are, all our resources. The father, the parents have to be accountable. Okay, you as student will be accountable for your responsibility. Okay, both our relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and our relationship with the fellow human beings. Okay, all that will be questioned in the day of judgment. That will be our primary accountability. Yeah? So that if you talk about being an accountant, being a URA students, IM students, being Malaysian, being the citizen of your country, and the fact that we live this life. So you have to remember this until the day of whenever, wherever. Okay, that we are at the end we are accountable to Allah, and these are the ongoing process that we must go through every day. Secondly, accountability, stakeholders. Okay, so we talk about government organizations. We'll discuss this. What are the stakeholders? So that can definitely part of accountability in Islamic perspective. All right, now move on to formal accountability structure in the case of government. Then we bring back to the government. Right, we cannot just understand the concepts, but how to translate these concepts into what's happening in practice. So the role of Parliament, okay, providing the resources to various government agencies. The Treasury, okay, the Treasury in the case of Malaysia is basically Ministry of Finance. Is a division under the Ministry of Finance. And then government and department, statutory bodies, okay, ministries, statutory bodies. These are basically the implementation agencies. Okay, they receive funding, they receive budgets. Okay, they use the budgets, so they must be whole accountable for their the resources entrusted to them. Okay, just like yourself. I mean, if you try to translate accountability or relate that to yourself, now every time when you are sent to study here for every semester, you know that you use up all the resources that is given to you, either resources provided by your parents, resources provided by the government, because these are public university, okay, heavily subsidized. So at the end, you must be accountable. So what will be the element of your accountable? So what you need to report as part of the accountability? Anyone? What do you need to report after use all the resources to achieve your objective? So what do you have to report? Anyone? Any answer?
CGPA.
Yes, you need to report your CGPA. Yeah? To whom? To the government? To your parents? To the university? To your lecturers? To whom?
Parents.
Yeah, okay, to the parents. Definitely, okay, definitely to the parents. Okay, but the government itself, okay, they want our students successfully completed their studies within the time frame. Okay, that's part of the accountability of the university. But at the same time, we have that responsibility to provide quality education. Okay, so that's why education. Last time I was asking my friend in one of the big GLIC, government-linked investment company. And I said, you invest in URA, take over this university and become private. And they said, it's simply too costly to make it profitable. So education is very costly, and on top of that, to provide quality education. So of course, at your level, you rightly pointed out that you'll be accountable to your parents. Okay, but at the same time, for the university, in educating the students, because it's a very important part of any country. Then there is also accountability, because we are entrusted of 500 million. Okay, some universities are entrusted 70-80% of their funding all from government. Okay, okay, on top of that, of course, there are mechanisms to question. So who provide the reports? Then Accountant General Department for the accounts, audited by the Auditor General. The report of the auditor will be presented to Parliament as well as Public Account Committee. Okay, but in terms of scrutinization by controlling officers, basically, they have to appear to Public Account Committee every year to answer all the questions regarding the audit findings. So Public Account Committee is basically part of executive or part of the parliament? Public Account Committee. Is it part of the parliament or is it part of executive or judiciary? Anyone? Class, are you with me or I'm alone here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right, so that's what I'm asking. Are you, this Public Account Committee, is it part of executive, judiciary or parliament?
Parliament.
Parliament.
Okay, parliament. Parliament, very good. Right, these are the flow. Okay, Public Account Committee is part of Parliament. So for the first 6 weeks, so we are talking about budget and how to make the budget, how to develop the budget, and how to control the budget. So we are talking about this part, okay, the Treasury tabling to the Parliament, okay, the Ministry of Finance, tabling to the Parliament, sometimes the Prime Minister. Okay, providing the budget and then transfer the budget. There are, they call it warrants, sub-warrants, grants, provided to responsibility centers, and then accounting officer provided accounts. Okay, basically AG system. Okay, you can see that of course nowadays all about online, and then they also with the financial statement provided. Okay, these are the second part of the PSA. We talk about preparation of financial statements, okay, various accounting techniques, reporting, financial reporting techniques. And then you can see that with the audited financial statement table presented to the Parliament as well as Public Account Committee with the audit report. Okay, so you can see now with the case of 1MDB, okay, how important these two pieces of information, particularly the auditor general report, very important. Okay, and it's also part of the court case. So you can see this. Okay, in other words, 1MDB case is an example of how this system works, to make sure that, of course, these are at on the extreme case, but generally the debate, you can see that both sides, the debate on the budget as well as the debate on the accounts. Then of course in the Parliament there are so many issues to be discussed, but otherwise then the Public Account Committee can also call anybody in the country, as long as they are directly or indirectly related to use of public fund. They can be called, either they are the civil servant as well as sometimes companies also, they receive grants from government. They can also be called to explain to Public Account Committee. Right? Okay, mechanisms of external accountability. Okay, we talk about internal accountability. There are also external accountability, particularly with the stakeholders. Okay, I took this because I think the discussion is important, because it's also, you can see clearly that it's also being practiced in Malaysia. Maybe definitely for international students, you can see that they maybe start coming to your country or is already widely practiced in your country. So disclosure information to citizens, including financial and non-financial information. Can also be financial performance, okay, non-financial performance, information on quantitative and qualitative information, right? Compulsory and voluntary disclosure of information. Compulsory can be by law, by regulations, by accounting standards. Okay, I think this is equally applied when you talk about for private firms, private companies. They can also applicable to government agencies. Monthly and annual performance report. I think for internal, mostly monthly. Right, I think in Malaysia it's more on annual performance report. Monthly is more on for internal, but it's there. I mean, it can be done if the system can provide. At least these are the direction. Okay, that people need nowadays. They need more answer, more questions. Okay, more what do you call it? They demand more information. Okay, on what's happening in the government. And if you look at the last point there, citizen participation in certain stages of decision making in public sector organizations. Okay, citizens, they can get involved in policy making. They can provide feedbacks. I think nowadays is already in place. Last time at both level, when the budget preparation, I think the Ministry of Finance also asking feedback from the public. The Prime Minister himself, okay, he also keep on consulting various stakeholders, and also you can use both. One is direct, the other face to face, and also through social media, right? And at the same time, I think you can see nowadays, if any government decision somehow disliked by the majority public, they can voice through social media or through all these online platform that can change the decision by the government. So it's real. It's not like before, when one decision is made, maybe after 1 year or 2 years, people can complain. But nowadays, you can see the impact very real, that the public can directly influence the decision by the government. Participation in board of agencies, okay, in other words, government agencies like statutory bodies, okay, particularly, okay, and also at the ministry level, sometimes they engage publics, experts, professionals, okay, they can participate in decision making. In the drafting or budgeting of document, because they allocate resources raised through taxation. Okay, so you can see this clearly, that participation directly by the citizens is also possible. Right, basic skill needed for holding position, accountability structure, willing to ask tough questions respectfully. Okay, I think you can see this is happening. I think that's the work of member of parliament. Okay, they should ask a tough question to make sure things are in order. That's why I think we need this running government as well as the opposition, strong opposition. But of course, not too strong that they break the government, but good question being asked and the good influences to make sure that there is check and balance. Willing to lose position, okay, that's normally if someone want to hold this public position. Independence, I think even in independence mean as member of parliament as well as member of board, particularly those who are from outside. Professional competence and due care, okay, so it means that they have all the right knowledge for them to execute or to discharge their duties. Integrity, okay, very important. Honest, and lastly, fear of day of judgment, as Muslims, definitely, because all this responsibility, and particularly, if the decision is made. You talk about country, okay, you talk about the development in the country, you talk about, people, 30 million to serve 30 million people in the case of Malaysia. Okay, in other countries, do we have any student from Bangladesh or Indonesia or Pakistan or other part? Where do we have here in this class? What country we have? All from Malaysia.
China.
China, yeah. You see, China, 1 billion, no, 1.6 billion of city. Yeah, so very big. Right. So the best system for China is the socialist. That's what they do. They do have. Okay. For some reason. But anyway, whatever system it has, but at the individual level, because if you talk about professional accountants, at the end it's about individual qualities. Okay, if you look at some of these, independence, professional competence, integrity, honest, and of course as Muslim we include this, very important, because fear of day of judgment, basically that's the main control. When we have this, then the rest is easy to comply. If there is none of this, then quite difficult. All right, any questions with regards to accountability? Very important topic. Hopefully something that you remember, right, for this class, because I will be with you. Because you choose this accounting, I think that's the job of accountant, isn't it? Any question? No one would like to ask question. Oh, okay. All right. If none, I still have half an hour, isn't it? Okay, let me continue with the second one. Okay. management accounting and budgeting in public sector. Can you see my screen? Oh, no chat.
Yes,
No, I think I have to reshare. Okay, it's coming. All right, so this is one. Okay. Right, you can get all these the copy of this from the GC. Yeah. Okay, now we move on. I think at this point you understand the structure of Malaysian government as an example, and then you already know what is accountability, right? I think as discussed just now. Now we move on to the topic, budgeting. I think try to understand this, then you can appreciate the entire what's happening in the government. Okay, and yeah, and also will be helpful when you want to develop your assignments. Otherwise, it would be very dry. But actually, I mean, every time when you try to link how this relevant to yourself, then it makes interesting. Yeah? Okay, the level of education, maybe we are the user of public services. When I'm providing you with this lecture, also you are the recipient of public services. Okay, as I speak, and then public transportations, roads, security, stability in the country, all the results of public services. The quality of food that we take. The clothing, okay, all these are basically regulated items, right? I think from head to toe, somehow there is influence of government is what we are doing, all right? Because either in one side, government will provide the services, or they become the regulator to make sure that the private service providers they really provide the right services at the right price to the citizens of any country. Okay, of course, I mean Malaysian government generally, I think globally also, we are, I think most countries are the supporters of free market. Okay, to a certain extent, of course, there are no country which is fully free market. There always some certain level of protectionism or restrictions. Okay, it's common, right? So as for a start, okay, in this we'll look at management accounting in public sector. Okay, and management accounting, I mean just general definition before we move to budgeting in public sector in terms of the objective, okay, the concepts, okay, before we move on to the techniques. Right, attributes of management accounting in the public sector organizations. Okay, special of MA in public sector is on the activities of the public sector. Okay, if you look at this, outputs are not normally measurable. Okay, sometimes you talk about quality education, for instance, quality healthcare. Okay, generally. Okay, so I think this is one of the issues that been raised to quantify. Okay, costs are usually recovered by levying a tax on the community rather than charging to users. Okay, these are the nature of the government or public sector services. Okay, indirectly, okay, the charging, basically the recovery of cost recovery is through tax rather than through pricing to customers. Costs of most public sector organizations are fixed at the beginning of the budget period, and level of activity is more predictable than in private sectors. Okay, because what it means basically the budget is quite fixed. Okay, once the budget is quite fixed, then I think the big chunk of public sector cost is basically because it's a service base generally. Then basically the big chunk of that is salary, salary as well as other like utilities and others. Okay, and I think it's fixed in the sense budget is limited. Okay, budget is limited. That's why to change the budget, it's not as easy as in the private sector, where they can plan for their financing, refinancing, okay, raise the fund. Of course, it's not as simple as it sounds, but they have more flexibilities because the decision is only at the board level, okay, then they can make that decision. Whereas in the government, in terms of budget, they need to go up to the parliament, okay. So once they plan, it's very difficult for them to change, particularly the level of budget, okay. So you need to accept that, to recognize that differences, okay, for you to be able to see how to control, how to manage government organizations. So that you can really understand. It sounds very simple sometimes, very straightforward, okay, to understand. But the challenge is because the government organization is huge and massive, okay. If you talk about healthcare, okay, Ministry of Health, the size is 30 billion budget, okay. Ministry of Education, 30 to 50 million, a billion, not million, 30 to 50 billion, massive, huge budget. If you look at, if you compare to public listed companies in Malaysia, public listed companies, there are less than 1,000 companies, and then the biggest maybe, not even reach 20 billion or 30 billion market capitalization. Okay, because the biggest are all basically GLC, okay, government-linked companies, okay, like Samdabi or Petronas. They are not listed companies. Okay, so you can see that dynamics for you to understand. So that's the challenge when we talk about how to provide good accounting system, good how accounting can support. So to make sure that when the discussion of at least at the end we can contribute when the general public asks, okay, government should be efficient, effective. So that that discussion can be we can contribute in that discussion. Okay, special focus on budgeting process to manage the budget allocation distributed by the Treasury. Okay, so that's why this become the focus of our discussion. How to make sure that the budgeting process is somehow can improve this allocation process. Okay, of course, the allocation here, particularly allocation process by itself, is an area of study. So this budget allocation or resource allocation, I think that's a basic economic problem, isn't it? How to have a best resource allocations to the right sectors, to most important areas. Okay, I think last time I found, I watched one of the Nobel laureate recipient is basically the economist, the professor in economics, that he's basically focusing on allocation of resources. Okay, so let's say for instance now the distribution of a vaccine, isn't it? What is the best, most effective and efficient way to distribute the vaccines? So there are formula, to go about it. All right. So in the case of Malaysia, China, for instance, 1.6 billion. If you talk about India, 1 billion. Okay, US, European, so 100 millions of people. How to distribute this vaccine in the most effective way so that it can reach the herd immunity, very quickly and the most efficient way. So mind-boggling, but it's possible and it's achievable because I think they have that formula. Okay. Right. Now we move on. The entire process of budgeting as part of planning and control mechanism within the government organizations. Okay, before that, is there any question? Oh, no question. We have a quick look if there is question. No question. Wow. Interesting. You cannot, because you cannot ask question, isn't it? Are you accessible to the chat?
No, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Oh yes, you can. All right. But you refuse to to ask question. Okay, no problem. Maybe too early. Okay, you collect all the question later on. Don't ask question only when the exam is near. Okay, so come back. I take this model, okay, from Jones and Pendlebury. Okay, should be years there. But I think if you search for Jones and Pendlebury public sector accounting, because Prof Pendlebury was my second supervisor when I did my PhD. Okay, nice guy. Right, and Jones, I think his friends. He's many studies. Okay, but he himself is a experienced chartered accountant before he moved to academics. Right. Anyway, so planning and control in public sector organizations. So you can see this. We start from planning, definitely. Okay, planning of fundamental aims and objectives, strategic planning. And then with strategic planning, I think you understand, isn't it? Strategic planning, operational planning. Do you understand this? These two terms, because you are final year? Yes. Yes or no? Strategic planning and operational planning. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Right. If you understand, then budgeting is basically related to the operational planning. Okay. The budgeting. Of course, later on, it's not. There are also budget for strategic planning. There are also budget for operational planning. Okay, but here in this diagram is talk about operational planning. Okay, it's the main mechanism. After having the strategic planning, then because operational planning, we talk about generally 5 years or 1 year operational planning. Operational planning, is it not usually 1 year or 5 years?
1 year.
Once it.
1 year. The time horizon for operational planning, 1 or 5 years?
1 year.
Yes, 1 year. So listen carefully. So operational planning is for 1 year. So sorry, 5 years or 1 year? 1 year. So 1 year. So listen carefully, because is part of that practice in the government. Okay, they provide budget for 1 year for operational budget. Okay, so with then for number 2, operational planning. With that operational planning, so they translate the operational planning into budgeting. So budgeting is basically the planning in the monetary form. Okay, to put it simply, so you have the planning, so and must be translated into money. So that's budgeting process. Okay, budgeting, of course, is budgeting process. The result is you have the budget statement, okay, approved budget and others. So once the budget is being approved, then it can be executed. Then there is if you look at number 4, control. Okay, controlling and measuring, number 4. So because to make sure that the budget is fully utilized, and it should be utilized correctly, more effectively, efficiently, okay, and also economic, right? So that's why there's controlling. So with the controlling, you have the report. So with the report, you analyze. So it's like an iteration process. There are also rooms for revision, modification. I think all this strategic planning and operational planning is very dynamic. Okay, and also it relates to internal and as well as external factors of the organizations, right? So so that's why you can see that budgeting is not in silo. Okay, it is part of the management. You know, as accountants also, and particularly nowadays, even the professional accountants, they promote that accountants should be very active in the strategic issues of the organizations. So these are equally applicable to private sector as well as public sector. You are no longer bean counters, just focus on your financial reporting. Okay, you must also help the organizations, the CEO, right, all the managers to make sure they make right decisions that have impact on financial performance, and also the value creation, the long-term value of the organizations, right? Of course, in public sector, you don't talk about valuation like the private sector. But the idea of services can be sustained, the relevant services can be provided. It's all very relevant to government organizations. Okay, planning and control. I think just quickly here. Of course, planning you understand, you learn in management and other subjects. But in this class, we'll discuss also the control part. How to make budgetary control. So I think there's a topic there. Okay, for budgetary control. Right, strategic planning and operational. I think I mentioned this. So when you talk about vision and mission, right? Vision and mission. Generally, vision and mission is about strategic or operational. Vision and mission of the organizations.
Strategic.
Strategic. And then if you look at the operational, right, for the government, you can see clearly there that the planning is for one fiscal year. Okay, one fiscal year. So take note of that. Unlike the private sector, they can have accounting period ended in whatever, generally in April or in June or July, right? Not necessarily in the following the fiscal year. So fiscal year is ended when? When is the fiscal year ended? Class?
December, sir.
31st December.
Yes, at 31st December. Okay, so government normally, not normally, they will. Okay, their accounting for their budget is ended 31st December. Okay, I think at this point, I think it's equally being applied in other countries as well. I'm yet to see that any government that have a year end other than the 31st December. Okay. So if you have, if you know, then you can let me know, but none that I'm aware of. Generally, they use fiscal year, okay? So very different than the private sector. Right, strategic planning, okay, formulation, right? I think number one is quite general, but if you look at two, the overall aim and objective of the public sector organizations depend very much on the political priorities and government policies, okay? So in the case of Malaysia, there's a Malaysian plan. Sometimes they also, from time to time, they have a very broad policy. They call it master plan, okay, industrial master plan, okay, education master plan, okay, from time to time, okay, either promoted by Prime Minister or promoted by each government ministry. Input from stakeholders are essential at the formulation process of vision and objective, okay. So engagement with stakeholders, I think, is the call of the day. Right, operational planning, fiscal year, and then, okay, talk about KPIs, provide framework within which the organization will operate in order to achieve its strategic objective. Okay, KPIs, performance target, may be expressed in financial or non-financial terms. Okay, all these, I think in terms of narrative, in terms of the content of this is very similar to what you learn in private sector, in other courses. But it's also applicable to government organizations. Okay, when you talk about KPIs, for instance, it should cover both financial and non-financial. And hopefully, I think in terms of KPIs, right? Hope is you can embed in your discussion for your assignment. But what I want is at least when you complete this course, you are very familiar with KPI of certain government agencies, okay, supporting certain industries or certain sectors. So that's, I mean, should be your general knowledge. Then you have real concrete understanding how things are happening, how government organizations manage, okay.
Seconds.
Seconds.
Oh, otherwise I'm talking to myself. All right. Who is the most dominant stakeholder? I have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay. Who's the most dominant stakeholder? We talked about stakeholders engagement just now. All right. Internal, external, and regulators, including funders. So internal controlling officers, top management, line managers, civil servants, right? So get yourself You have to imagine what is government agency. I think the most, if you really can imagine, you can imagine URA, IIUM. Okay, you can make rector is there, board of governors is there, senate members. Okay, then you have kuliah, faculty as line managers. Then you have URA staff. Either you have very good experience or very bad experience, right? Handling these are basically public sector organizations. And that's for internal, external, customers, suppliers, general public, political masters. Okay, and also very important. And then the funders and regulators, including the ruler, Yang di-Pertuan Agong, Prime Minister, the Treasury, and Parent Ministry. Okay, like our university, Prime Ministry is, what is our Parent Ministry for the public university?
MOHE.
Yeah, Ministry of Higher Learning. Okay, so for your assignment, you need to make sure that if you identify government agencies, so like parent ministry, so you must clearly know who are their parent ministry, right? So that you can be able to tell. Because generally, government agencies, they are supporting the policy, government policy, and this government policy, the in charge person, the person in charge is the ministers of the ministry, as well as all the key leaders within the ministry, right? And sometimes they share also, as we discussed just now, previously, that one policy being shared with multiple ministries and agencies. All right. So the question is still there. Who is the most dominant stakeholder? Dominant, right? Dominant. Who is the most dominant stakeholder? What do you mean by dominant? Dominant. Strongest? Most influential? All right. These are management of the stakeholders. In a way, it's also very useful. I think one of the dominant stakeholders. Dominant stakeholders for this discussion is basically the stakeholder that can demand the public resources the highest. Okay, that is what it means by the most dominant stakeholder for PSA class. Okay, the group of stakeholder that can demand the resources, the public resources the highest. Okay, so that all these resources be utilized for them. Yeah, if you talk about efficiency, effectiveness, so on that dimension, right? Because if you look at the top management, they have to take into account, okay, the internal stakeholders, the external stakeholders, as well as the demand by the regulators and funders. Okay, so these are all need to be taken into account. But with my remark just now, who should be the most dominant stakeholder? Okay, so you want to answer now or you want to answer in the exam? Okay, right, so reserve that. Okay, role of elected civil servant versus appointed civil servant. Okay, so I think I did mention about elected civil servant. These are members of parliament. Members of parliament, they win the election, so they become elected civil servant. Other than elected, they are all appointed. So people like me, or maybe if you look at other than, they are permanent staff in the government organization, they are appointed civil servants. Okay. I think definitely elected civil servant. I think the good part of them is because they have two hats. One, they are elected civil servant. They basically part of service providers, public service providers. But at the same time, they also have to represent the public, the voters, because they are being elected. Okay, I think a very interesting position. Okay, I think give an example in the case of Datuk Seri Khairi Jamaluddin. I think he was commenting, criticizing on online business tax. There was a proposal Then he was, I think that time he was the youth and sport minister, right? I think so. The influence that made, I think that later on this tax was never being materialized. So their voice is important. Right, and so if you look at this in terms of stakeholders management, who affect the most government organizations in prioritizing the activities. Okay, there are all these stakeholders just now. In terms of power, they can have low power, high power. Okay, in terms of interest, they can have high interest, they can have low interest. So let us see there are 4 topology here: keep informed, key players, minimal effort, and keep satisfied. So I think the most important, if you see that key players, so if you look at key players, the power is high, their interest also high. Okay, they become key players. So it means that their interests need to be addressed. But there are also stakeholders, their interest is high, but their power is low. Okay, they don't really can influence the decision in the government agency. So keep them informed. Keep them informed and updated. There are also stakeholders, the power is very high, but their interest is low. So keep them satisfied. Okay, so I think it's almost as good as key players. But there are also stakeholders where their power is low, they cannot do anything. Their interest also very low, right? So just almost minimal effort means the organization, because they have multiple stakeholders, you can ignore these groups. But one thing that you need to realize, because these stakeholders just now, they can jump. Okay, let's say general public, they can become very low interest and very low power. But if their interests are not being addressed, they can change to key players. Okay, so these are the issues. They can change to very high power. Okay, by these stakeholders, they can jump into. Of course, the main one is the key players, where their power is very high and their interest is very high. So this becomes the key focus, where all the money will be plowed into this group of stakeholders. Right, and these are in terms of the source of the power. Source of power can be position. Okay, as I mentioned just now. Okay, like the minister. Okay, they can influence the decision of the government. The system, because we have the system, control the system. It can be source of power as well. The expertise, knowledge, resources that you hold. Okay, Ministry of Finance, very powerful. Okay, because they keep the resources. The personnel, okay, you have the people, the right people. Okay, they can also become the source of power, can influence. In terms of resolution, conflict resolution, side payments. Okay, so I'm not saying that this should be corruption or bribery. Exercise of power, right? Satisfying, I think, for the lower group, and sequential attention from one group after another. But it's just that sometimes when the group is the stakeholder is so influential, so their need to be addressed quickly. Right. Discussion. Okay, before that, who should be the dominant stakeholder or the key players for the government organization, where they can demand the most resources when you talk about resource allocation? Who should be? If you leave this class, at least you understand this. Most important.
Internet.
Internal, okay, other? Who should be, I said, who should be? I'm not saying that who are. Who are the most dominant? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that who should be the dominant stakeholder, so that if the government channel their resources most to this group of stakeholders, they become effective, efficient. And of course, they also have to exercise economic. So they basically perform better. So which?
It's either political master or general public, I think.
Okay, of course. You should suggest. Another? One more?
In my opinion, it's the citizens itself, because the society is impacted by where the resources are allocated to.
Okay. So if you talk about government in general, yes, you are right. General public, political master can play a role. Okay, but if you talk about government organizations, okay, government organizations like UIA, like welfare department, like schools, okay, who should be their dominant stakeholder? Using the name that I'm showing here. Which one is always right?
Customer.
They are always right. Huh?
The
Aku.
customer.
The customers, isn't it? The customers. Okay. So customers should be the dominant stakeholders, because if you bring in the private sector, okay, in the company, that under that kind of perspective, okay, customers are always right. So, and then with that, they can really do business. So in this case also, right? So the customers should be the dominant stakeholders when we talk about efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, listen carefully, because what customer means. Right? Are you with me or not? No.
Yes, sir.
Of course, I mean, you may ask, these word customers, are they being used by government agencies? They do. They do use, right? Because later on when we discuss about government budgeting techniques, so these words are being used by the government. It's just that maybe there are resistance, but the concepts and implementation in the part of the budget process, they are there. It should be. Okay. So then you can understand. When we talk about good performance, okay, in the private sector, you talk about maximizing profits through providing good services, good products. Okay. Well, of course, take into account with other dimensions, but the government also, you can use the same perspective. It may sound simplistic, but it may also at the same time sound very important and critical. Okay, but it's just that how to translate that into more practical. But this dimension is there. Okay, discussion: do government organization have autonomy? Okay, I think. Right, I think I stop here. Think about it. Okay, this question: do government organizations have autonomy for policy making, strategic planning, operational planning? Challenges to balance the freedom to manage and control of public services in light of improving in serving public interest. So what is that? Is basically, okay, if you think about, I think I just give an example so that you can appreciate this discussion. It's just like 1MDB. 1MDB in principle is good because it was set up to speed up reforms and to speed up service delivery, because the demand for government, I think, in terms of housing and others, are so highly demanded at that time. It's just that too fast, so there is weaknesses in control. So, and when it is not done correctly, so the consequences is devastating. This is that's what the line of discussion that I'm getting at. Okay. Right. I thought next class we can discuss this budgeting. Any question before I end this class?
Sir,
Yes.
we cannot access the chat box.
Okay. I have to find out. That's why you don't ask question.
Yeah, most probably.
Most probably. Okay, I have to find out. Right. There are so many tricks and here and there. Meeting notes, meeting detail. Maybe next time I will find out. Okay. You can ask. You can voice out. 1 minute. What time is now? Yeah. Okay. If no question, then I will end this session with wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.